Keo here from Stomp USA. I'd like to remind you that this video series about how the experimental process I use and the input I got from friends to learn how to play easily in the upper register, actually just to play the trumpet easier. Because when you play the trumpet easier, the upper register gets easier. So it's really about the whole thing. So this explanation, if you will, this video series is not a super planned out part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, because that's not how this process worked for me. It was not a linear progression. It wasn't like I figured one thing out and that led me to the next one and that led me to the next one and the next one. There were a lot of different things that came into play along the way. So just remember that and use this as a guide to figure out how you can teach yourself to learn how to play the trumpet easier. So around the time that I was wondering how come all these friends of mine, great players, could play high and I couldn't, and how much stronger did my chops have to get before I could now play above a high D, an interesting phenomenon happened to me. I had started my new band at the time, Reno Jones, which was an R&B and blues band, and we would often start the show with a tune called A Good Fool Is Hard to Find, and it would start where I had to come in on an E flat, and it would be like the drums are going da 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 da, and then the groove is going on. Well, remember, I was a high D player, and E flat's a half step above a high D, and I would practice it. I'd get on the gig, I'd take a big breath, the drums go. I rarely ever got that first E flat out. I'd usually come in on the D. Nothing would come out on the E flat, the D would come in, and because it was this big explosion of sound from a 9-piece R&B and blues band starting out, no one in the audience would notice, usually not even trumpet players, but I certainly knew it. And then a strange thing happened, which was that because I was also the band leader, I had a lot of different roles I had to play when I got to the gig. I was interfacing with the sound guy, I was making sure everyone was happy and set up, I was dealing with whoever the promoter was to see if we were going to get paid or not get paid, and oftentimes I was really scuffling before it was time for us to start. And we were playing, I remember it was B.B. King's at Universal City Walk. It was an important gig for us. I don't remember who we were opening for, but we were playing B.B. King's. And I was busy trying to take care of some things. We're on stage, and all of a sudden, man, I hear Larry, our drummer, count off the tune. Well, I didn't have time to take a breath. I just got the horn up, and surprised as heck, insert whatever other word you want, E flat came out. Okay, I was happy, went on with the show, and was wondering what the heck happened. How come the E flat came out? I didn't prepare. I hadn't changed my routine. I hadn't had any more or less to drink that night than I normally did. I hadn't had any more or less to eat that night. So what the heck happened? So over the course of the next few gigs that we had, I tried the beginning of that tune, starting it without taking a breath at all, and also with taking my big breath that I was used to taking, being prepared. And darn if every time I didn't take the breath, the E flat came out. And every time I did take the big breath, the E flat didn't come out. Scratching my head. Around this time was just about when I first met Jim Manley, and I talked to him on the phone a few times, and the internet wasn't as teeming with videos of Jim Manley or others at the time, so I didn't have that much experience with him, but he flew out to California, came to Bob Reeves' shop, where I was working at the time, to get a new mouthpiece or I don't know what it was. But anyway, I asked him if he'd give me a lesson, and he said, yeah, sure. He goes, what time are you done? I said, I'm done about 4:30. He said, all right, when you're done, I'll give you a lesson. So about 4:30 comes, and he was talking to Bob, or I'm pretty sure, and so I go in the back, and I start doing my warm-up, because I want to impress Jim Manley. So I'm going through my warm-up to be ready, so I'm all good to go. And Jim comes in the back, and he interrupts me. I'm in the middle. I haven't gotten through my warm-up yet. And he says, oh, yeah, you sound really good. And then he proceeded to show me everything I was doing wrong. And what I took away from that first lesson was very simple. He said, use less air. Use less air. He says, you're using too much air. You don't need to use that much air. Okay. That's what I took away from that lesson. So let's think about this a little bit. What do we really use the air for? Well, let's talk about the buzz cycle. It's very simple. Your chops start closed. These are your chops, and let's call this the mouthpiece. So for the sake of this, let's say that your lips are closed. We're going to simplify it. There's an argument as are the lips really closed, but it's not important for this. So your lips start closed, and you start blowing air. And when the air in your mouth, the pressure, gets higher than the air in the mouthpiece, your lips open. The air bleeds off, and when the pressure in the mouthpiece now becomes higher than the pressure in your mouth, your lips close again. And that's the simple buzz cycle, only it happens really, really fast over a short period of time, depending on how long you're playing. So think about this. If you've got a lot of mechanical pressure, you're clamping down on your chops, you've been practicing those range exercises, and your chops are so strong and you're good to go, and they start closed, you've got a bunch of mechanical pressure on top of the air pressure that you have to overcome. So you have to blow harder to get these chops to open the first time. Well, now when they're open, because you're blowing hard, you need more force to close them down. And this mechanical force tends to snowball. And you use more and more strength from your chops to either hold them down, let them open, blah, 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 and it's more than you need. All you need to do is for these lips to open and close. That's all they need to do. If you could make them open and close without any air, you could still play the trumpet. In order to demonstrate this, I made a special mouthpiece. I took a regular mouthpiece and I cut it in half through the cup. And then what I did was put an O-ring groove in here, and I made an exit hole that's above the cut of the mouthpiece. And this allows me to take a membrane, stretch this membrane across the mouthpiece cup, and I have a little O-ring, and then I can secure this down with some screws, and that holds it. So what happens is, when it's all put together, if you blow into the mouthpiece, all the air is redirected out the side, and none of the air from your mouth goes into the trumpet. The idea is the exit hole's above the membrane, so when you're playing the mouthpiece, no air from your mouth is going into the trumpet. It's all redirected out the side, but you can still play the trumpet. And I have a little video I'm going to show you of Mark Nelson, who I met in North Dakota, and he really liked playing this mouthpiece, so I let him play it and I videoed him. Check it out. So what about the air? How much air actually goes through the horn? And how fast does it go through the horn? Well, it depends on the register you're playing in, but typically it takes about 4 to 5 seconds for the air in your mouth to make it to the bell. In that 4 or 5 seconds, the sound wave has already traveled a mile. Think about that. In that 4 to 5 seconds, the sound wave has traveled almost a mile. The sound wave sets up like that in about 3.5 milliseconds. And that's what really counts. So, again, through all of this, I'm thinking back, and I remember taking a lesson from Vince Penzarella. I remember Vince saying that some trumpet players had told him that they used 20 pounds of air pressure to play a low C, double that, 40 pounds of air pressure to play a middle C, double it again, and 80 pounds of air pressure to play a high C. And Vince says, I do it in 2, 4, and 8. Okay, think about what he just said. He just said to use less air. I didn't get it at the time. I took away from Vince Penzarella, you need a lot of air to play the trumpet. That's where we come into this bias. We're told that from the beginning. You got to use a lot of air and a lot of effort to play that high C. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Then I remember seeing a video of Rafael Mendez, and it was a live TV show. And it was kind of weird because back in the 60s, and it's a live TV show, I think it was in the 60s, and he was talking about how to play the trumpet. Like the normal person watching this show is going to be interested in how to play the trumpet. And he makes this statement.
The trumpet is a wind instrument, and you need plenty of wind to play it. Not that one forces the wind. Never that. You never use more effort to produce the tone than you do in ordinary conversation. But breath control is one of the most important factors in trumpet playing.
I remember walking away from that at the time thinking, wow, he said it takes a lot of air to play the trumpet. But that's not the important thing he said. The important thing is what he said after that. And that is you use no more air than you use in ordinary conversation. That means Rafael Mendez is telling us to use the air that I'm using right now to talk to you. Well, turns out you can do it that way. Now here's a clip of Rafael playing something in one breath. And notice at the beginning the breath he takes. He doesn't go and tank up and have all this effort and air and tension. He goes bum bum and he plays the tune. Check it out.
For example, in one breath.
What I'm trying to do in this second video is explain some of the clues that I put together that made me realize that you didn't need a lot of strength to play the trumpet. In fact, less strength was even better. So I remember thinking, you know, there have been times in my life when I was really sick. I had the flu or I had a really bad sore throat and I didn't even want to look at the trumpet, let alone, you know, play it. And so I hadn't played for maybe a week. I mean, nothing at all. And then all of a sudden I had a gig. And I'd go to the gig and I played really well. Well, that would make me scratch my head and I'd just write it off as an anomaly. Oh, whatever. You know, something weird happened. The stars were aligned properly. But when you think about it, how strong was I at that point? I was the opposite of strong. I was weak. I hadn't been doing my daily routine. By all normal accounts, my chops should be weak. I was I was physically weak. I'd had the flu. I still had the flu. Could barely breathe. Yet here I'd go and play the gig really well. Okay, I put all that together. And I've asked other trumpet players about that. Have they experienced that? And many have. Maybe you have. Many have experienced the fact that they've been sick as a dog, they haven't played, they go to a gig and they play really well. Well, aside from being weak, not being all strong, they didn't care. They just wanted to get through the gig, so they weren't worried about it. They weren't worried about it. I remember when I took a lesson from Ollie Mitchell in Hawaii, Ollie said, and I quote, "Concentrate like hell, but don't give a shit." Okay, what's he telling me to do? He's telling me to concentrate on the music, but don't care. Don't be worried about it. Don't be nervous about it. Don't be tense about it. So if you believe that the trumpet is a weightlifting activity, and if you believe that you must do your routines every day or every other day or whatever it is to stay in top shape, you can't explain the guys like myself who have been weaker than anything because they've had the flu and yet they played really well. But if you accept that playing the trumpet can be a skill and that the more relaxed you are, the weaker you are, the better you're going to play, then you can explain that phenomenon. I'll leave you with this today. One of the first things I started working on after that first lesson with Jim Manley was breath attacking a low C as quietly as possible. My goal was to figure out how to start that low C with the least amount of effort and the least amount of air and still get a sound, have it engage with a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of air. And this is where I started experimenting. I started experimenting with rolling my lips out, pulling them in, dropping my jaw, bringing my jaw up, rolling them in, blah, blah, blah. And so here's the point. Try to figure out what you have to do to make your chops engage extremely quietly on a low C. You're not going to hurt anything you have. It's just a low C. And that's where it starts, figuring out how to get that low C to vibrate with the tiniest amount of effort. And the only way that I was able to do it was to get everything really relaxed, no tension, and I just worked on it for a few minutes a day for a while. So start there. Hope you've enjoyed this. As I said before, if you did, tell your friends. And if you don't enjoy it, take the link and send it to someone you don't like.